Okay, hello, Bill Moore here. I'm host for History for My Grandchildren on Radio Vision Network. And today I'm going to talk about Samhain. Now, my Gaelic pronunciation is horrible. I've called it Samhain all my life, but I've looked and researched, and modern Irish, it's called Samhain, and older Irish was Samhain. So I've mispronounced it all my life. So if I say Samhain, you'll know I'm talking about Samhain. All right. I want to give you some Celtic background first because Samhain or Samhain is a Celtic holiday, and it goes back into the dim, distant past, thousands of years ago. Thousands of years ago, the Celtic world stretched across all of what we know as modern day Europe. At one time, the Celts were the biggest rivals for the then growing power of Rome. And at one time, the Celts and the Romans met. It was the largest battle recorded in the ancient world, and there were upwards of 40,000 warriors on the field. Now, just imagine this, the melee that occurred when you had 40,000 warriors with swords and battle axes and spears, chariots, the milling around, the sounds, the smells. It was something that we could not imagine today. Well, the Celts lost that battle, and one of the reasons they lost that battle was because they fought as individual warriors. The Romans had a plan, the Romans had teamwork, and the Romans prevailed that day. The Celts gradually were pushed to the outer edges of what became Europe, to places like Ireland, to the Highlands of Scotland, to the islands off of both Scotland and Ireland, down into Wales, down into Cornwall, to Normandy and Brittany in France. This is where the Celtic legends, this is where the Celtic traditions, this is where the Celtic language still stayed. So that gives you some idea of who the Celts were and where they came from. And they go back to what we refer to as Indo-European language. They came from a place far beyond Europe and migrated all the way across Europe and populated and peopled much of what was Europe. Now let's talk about the festival itself. Okay, Samhain or Samhain was talked about as a harvest festival, but not quite in the sense that we would think of today. It was the end of the harvest. It marked the beginning of winter, the darker half of the year. Now, Celtic festivals were traditionally celebrated from the beginning of one Celtic day to its end. So Samhain or Samhain was celebrated from sunset on October 31st to sunset on November 1st. This is halfway between the autumnal equinox and the winter solstice. A quick astronomy lesson: the autumnal equinox is the time when the sun is in its passage around, the sun is in its passage, the earth is in its passage around the sun, and it's the time. Equinox means equal nights. The amount of daylight and darkness are the same. The winter solstice is referred to as the shortest day of the year. It doesn't mean the day is any less than 24 hours. What it means is it's the least amount of daylight in the year. And you'll recall that right before Christmas, it's getting dark about 4:30 in the afternoon, because the winter solstice occurs on or about December 21st. And it's no accident that the winter solstice and Christmas are very close. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Samhain or Samhain was one of four Gaelic seasonal festivals. There was Imbolc, which was celebrated on February the 1st. There was Beltane, which was celebrated on May 1st. And there was Lughnasadh, and that was celebrated on August the 1st. Any of you Gaelic speakers out there, forgive my pronunciation. As I said, I'm not conversant in my language or the language of my ancestors. But Beltane and Samhain were the two important ones, and they marked the beginning of the two halves of the year. Okay? Now, Samhain has pre-Christian origins, as I said, thousands of years ago. The date has been important since ancient times. And if we could see the picture of the stone calendar, picture number 2, we'll get some idea. People don't write on stone anymore. Samhain is on there, and so are some of the other dates important in Celtic times. Now, how old is Samhain? Well, the Mound of Hostages on Tara Hill, and Tara, remember, is important to the kings of Ireland. The high kings of Ireland governed from Tara. Tara, this Mound of Hostages on the hill at Tara, is a Neolithic passage tomb. That means it goes far back beyond history, into prehistoric times. And interestingly enough, that Neolithic passage tomb is aligned with the sunrise on Samhain. Okay? Samhain is found mentioned in Irish literature over and over again. Matter of fact, most of Irish literature, what we would now refer to as Irish mythology, deals with events that occurred on Samhain. And if we can look at the picture number 1 of the warrior, this is a depiction of an Irish warrior. You look, he's got a war chariot, he's armed with a spear. Looks like he's got a driver so that he can attend to business with the spears. He's probably got more than one spear. And this would be the classic Irish warrior. These calendar events, Samhain was so very important that one of the first mentions, one of the first literature in the Irish and later the English language was the cattle raid of Cooley. The cattle raid of Cooley began on Samhain. Now, what significance is that? Why did it begin then? Most cattle raids, remember Samhain, I said, marks the beginning of winter. It's October 31st, November 1st. Right? Most cattle raids occurred in the summertime. Hold that thought. We're going to break for a commercial, and I'll come back to that, and we'll finish up with our Samhain story, and we'll get to a little bit more modern times.
Sub some sizzle. This is the way. The way it's always been. The way it always should be. The way it always will be. Because that's just the way it's supposed to be. Jersey Mike's. Be a sub above.
Simply Gents, located in Marlton, New Jersey, takes care of all your grooming needs, including haircuts, straight razor shaves, massages, facials, manicures, pedicures, and waxing. To find more information or book an appointment, visit us online at www.simplygents.com. The secret weapon of a well-groomed man, Simply Gents.
If you haven't been to Speed Raceway, what are you waiting for? You want to live fast? You want to make every second count? Then grab the family. Round up the guys. Speed Raceway is 100,000 square feet of excitement, whether you're a kid or a kid at heart. Speed Raceway is the place for endless fun all summer long. Log on to speedraceway.com or just get here now.
When it's time for Jersey Mike's to make a really great sub, this is what we do. It's what we've been doing. It's what we've always done. It's what we'll always do. So what are you doing? Jersey Mike's. Be a sub above.
Today's show was brought to you by Alicia Kelly of White Horse RV Center in Williamstown, New Jersey. Alicia is your RV expert. Contact Alicia at whitehorserv.com or give her a call at 856-262-1717, extension 203. When you think of RV, think Alicia Kelly.
Today's show has been sponsored by Farmers Insurance in Voorhees, New Jersey. To protect your assets and the people you love, call Mike Skoranek, your local Farmers Insurance agent, at 856-336-2553.
We are farmers. Bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum.
Bill Moore back with History for My Grandchildren on Radio Vision Network. We were speaking before the break about the cattle raid of Cooley and why it occurred in or at Salween. Most cattle raids occurred in the summertime. This, however, occurred at this time as a strategic plan, and the people who the cattle raid was made against were quite surprised that, oh, you don't do these things at this time of the year. They were overwhelmed and the cattle raid was successful. Again, most Irish mythology mentions Samhain or Samhain as a start or as a place where the time that the mythology took place. Now, you can tell from the cattle raid of Cooley, or maybe you can't, that this holiday or this date, so very important to the Celtic world, occurred or was when they were a pastoral people. They were herdsmen. During the summer, the cattle were taken up to the high places, and when winter started, the cattle were brought down and brought closer to home so that they could be protected from any predators and also from the onslaught of winter. Now, how important was this Samhain? Well, one day became a festival, the festival of Yulad, and again, forgive my pronunciation, and it lasted for 1 week, 3 days prior to Samhain and 3 days afterwards. So you had a full week. At this festival, there were meetings, there were games, there was feasting, and it's said, if you look at Irish literature, Irish mythology, any mention of alcohol or the consumption of alcoholic beverages occurred during Samhain. So there must have been mead and other alcoholic beverages served. Now let's bring Samhain a little bit closer to our day and times, but before we do that, I want to talk about some of the customs and beliefs of Samhain. Just as today, cattlemen send livestock to slaughter, the pastoral Celts slaughtered their livestock for the winter. They selected the ones to be slaughtered, and they were slaughtered because the meat would be better preserved over the winter. Bonfires were lit, one of the other beliefs. Now let's think about a bonfire. First of all, they believed that it was protective because bonfires kept the animals away, kept the predators away, but they also believed that the smoke was cleansing. Now you can see that belief carried on into more modern times with the rituals of some modern churches. The incense, the smoke was somehow cleansing. These ritual bonfires also mimic the sun, and to people from a very, very long time ago, it looked like something was happening to the sun because it didn't stay in the sky as long, and there was more darkness than daylight. This also was referred to as a liminal time, and that means that the boundary between this world and the other world, the so-called spirit world, could be crossed easily. The spirits or the fairies, and again, my Celtic pronunciation, Eosi, could easily come into this world. Now we have a picture of a cave in County Roscommon. I think that's picture number 3, and that's called the Cave of Cats, Awi Nagat. And it was believed that spirits and other creatures from the other world could easily pass out. Sort of like a portal between worlds, as we talk about in science fiction and also in more modern physics, if you will. Okay? Now, one of the beliefs is that the fairies needed to be bribed. The fairies needed to be bribed to ensure that the people would survive the winter and also that their livestock would survive the winter in good health. Remember, the basis for their wealth, the basis for their economy was livestock. They were a pastoral people. What did they do to propitiate the spirits or the fairies? They left out offerings of food and drink, and they were left outside. They also thought at this time that the souls of the dead were thought to revisit their homes, seeking, for the most part, hospitality. But sometimes on the darker side, seeking revenge for wrongs or deeds that were done against them. Now, something that occurred very, very early in time was that people went door to door in costume. These costumes imitated the fairies or the spirits from the other world. Now, unfortunately, most of Celtic literature, most of Celtic tradition and belief was an oral tradition, an oral belief. When the Celtic world was Christianized, much of this was more than likely set aside or it was changed to fit the doctrines of the church. So it's no surprise that these Celtic dates live on into the modern world, but they have a more modern turn to them. To tell you how important, again, Samhain was, the Royal Assembly was held on this date in medieval Ireland. So the Royal Assembly occurred at Tara, and everyone came, and again, that was the festival of Yulad. You had a week of basically partying, basically meetings and assemblies. It was the end of the season of warfare. It was the end of the farming season, and we look and we've jumped up hundreds of years, but we see an early celebration from the period when it was transiting or changing, morphing from Samhain into what we refer to today as Halloween. Sometime in the 9th century, Western Christianity shifted the date of All Saints' Day to November 1st, and November 2nd became All Souls' Day. This is important, okay? Because October 31st, All Hallows Eve, or All Hallows Even, was corrupted into what we refer to as Halloween. Halloween is the, hold that thought, we'll come back and we'll morph Samhain into Halloween after we have our commercial break.
Today's show is sponsored by Hargrove Demolition, your demolition experts. Hargrove is a family-owned and operated business right here in the southern New Jersey area, bringing you 45 years of demolition expertise. Hargrove has all your demolition needs, from emergency demolition service to demolition equipment rental. Hargrove is one of the state-approved recycling facilities right here in the southern New Jersey area. No job is too big or too small for Hargrove Demolition. Contact them today at one of their 3 locations.
When it's time for Jersey Mike's to give a sub some sizzle, this is the way. the way it's always been. The way it always should be. The way it always will be. Because that's just the way it's supposed to be. Jersey Mike's. Be a sub above.
If you haven't been to Speed Raceway, what are you waiting for? You want to live fast? You want to make every second count? Then grab the family. Round up the guys. Speed Raceway is 100,000 square feet of excitement, whether you're a kid or a kid at heart. Speed Raceway is the place for endless fun all summer long. Log on to speedraceway.com or just get here now.
When we make Beyond Natural dry dog and cat foods, we start with real meat as the first ingredient. We leave out corn, wheat, and soy. And we own where our dry food is made. 100%. Can other brands say all that? For nutrition you can trust and your pet will enjoy. Does your food go beyond? Learn more at purinabeyond.com.
Extra Innings is the nation's premier indoor baseball and softball training center, featuring indoor batting cages, 7 multi-use tunnels, and training rooms. Extra Innings can provide professional instruction, private and group lessons, and the best year-round clinics. Along with a nationally recognized pro shop that features the latest and widest selection of equipment and apparel, our experienced staff can provide you with the right instruction and help you find the best equipment for your ability and budget. Extra Innings, where the game never ends.
Today's show has been sponsored by More Than Gifts. Come see our new location in Marlton, New Jersey. Not just gifts, but more.
Bill Moore back with History for My Grandchildren, and we're morphing Samhain, or Samhain, if you'll permit my pronunciation of it, into Halloween. Okay, as I said before the break, sometime in the 9th century, Western Christianity shifted some dates around, and they kept the previous holiday, but they termed it a little bit different. You can understand that. And it became All Hallows Even, or evening, or eve, and that was corrupted into Halloween. Now, one of the things that continued from an earlier time was what they referred to as guising. We would understand as disguising, if you will. Costume people went house to house, and they impersonated souls of the dead, and they received offerings, or what we would refer to as treats, on their behalf. It also mimicked what was done in earlier times when people went door to door, went from household to household, getting things for the bonfire, for the ritual bonfire. Now, when the Irish and Scottish, who were the prime receptors, or the prime receptacle where Celtic tradition lay, when they made their mass migration to America, their customs came with them. And this is what brought Halloween to America. The Scottish came way back when, back in the 1700s, before the Revolution. The Scottish came just after, and the Irish first came in the 1820s, and by the time of the famine in the 1840s, you had millions of people with a Celtic heritage come to America. One of the things that the Celtic people did when they went from place to place seeking offerings, seeking treats, was to carve a turnip and place a light in that turnip. And that was how they found their way in the dead of night. Now, if we look at that carved turnip, I think it's picture number 4. It looks more like a mummy than a turnip, but that is the origin. There's your origin of the pumpkin carving at Halloween. Pumpkins are a lot more common in America nowadays. With the predominance of Halloween, it's a large industry, and we see huge fields of pumpkins Every major retailer sells pumpkins at Halloween. Matter of fact, Halloween is the second largest holiday in the U.S. in terms of dollars spent. You ride around and look at the decorations, look at the huge inflatables, look at the lights. Halloween is a big deal. This is how Samhain became Halloween. Halloween is the continuation of a tradition, an Irish tradition or traditions that go back thousands of years. The Irish have had a large part to play in the history of America because they are the largest ethnic group in America. They came in the mid-1800s literally by the millions. And I want to talk a little bit about Halloween in what I refer to as its heyday, or the time when the best era for what we think of today as Halloween. And that was in the 40s and 50s. It was a safer time. We didn't have to worry about candy being tampered with dangerous things. Yes, there were drugs around, but there wasn't the epidemic that we seem to have today. So I want to tell you a little bit about my childhood and what we did for Halloween. Halloween was very important to us. Halloween was a 2-night affair. And I've had people look at me, how did you get away with 2 nights? Well, it wasn't so much as getting away. We dressed in costume. Sometimes the costumes were bought, and there would be pirate costumes, there would be costumes of animals, leopards and panthers and things like that. There would be, little girls would be dressed up as fairies and princes and kings, and sometimes little boys were cowboys, and sometimes they were Indians. And then there were the homemade costumes. A good old sheet, and you were a ghost almost immediately. Cut a few holes for eyes, and you were pretty scary as a little kid. Okay? You could dress up in old clothes, and you could be a bum, or what was referred to in those days as a hobo. There were all sorts of ways. You could dress up with burlap and, sling it over your shoulder. You could be a Viking. You could be an ancient warrior. You could be all sorts of things. We needed 2 nights because we only went to the houses, and this was small town America in the 40s and 50s. We only went to the houses of people who knew us. And there were so many people that knew you in town that it took you 2 nights to do that. Now, our trick-or-treat bags were usually pillowcases, and we received so many treats that usually, at least once during the night, you had to go home and empty your bag because it became too heavy to carry. When you knocked on the door, the people let you into the house. It wasn't people come to the door, open the door, and dump candy in your bag. You were ushered into the house, where the people in the house were sitting in their living room. You were ushered into the living room, and then they tried to guess who you were. If you had a really good costume, they couldn't tell who you were. But if your costume was such and they knew you very well, they could tell by certain mannerisms. If you spoke, they could tell who you were. And it was great fun guessing who you were. After that came the treats. More often than not, each house had a special little bag. It had your name on it. In there was candy. There might have been candy apples. There might have been cupcakes. There were all sorts of treats. And people were genuinely glad to see you at their house. They looked forward to guessing who you were. And if by some chance you missed going to that house, when they saw you on the street in the days after Halloween, we missed you at Halloween. We did not see you. Okay? We did not see you at all. Excuse me for a moment. Once again, I've forgotten my cell phone, and I've got to hang up on somebody and call that back again. modern times intrude always. Okay, back to Halloween custom and back to what it was like when I was a kid. Now, one of the other things that was very important at Halloween was the fact that you had to carve a pumpkin. It was serious business. It was a family affair. It was a ritual that took place days before Halloween, not too long, because you didn't want your pumpkin to fall apart on Halloween. When you were little, your parents helped you cut the pumpkin and helped you carve the pumpkin. But even when you were little, if dad or mom cut the top off the pumpkin, you had fun with the big spoon carving out the center of the pumpkin. And then you did your pumpkin face. More often than not, it was a friendly face. It was a smiley pumpkin, and it reminded you of an earlier time when turnips instead of pumpkins were used, but it also reflected, I think, the safer times of the 40s and 50s. There was a real candle placed in this pumpkin. That real candle was lit, the pumpkin was taken outside, and it was set on a big dish at the front door. Okay? And it was a big deal. Your pumpkin was lit every night up to, including Halloween, and for a few nights afterwards, because we never really wanted Halloween to end because it was so much fun. So there you have it. You have the transition, you have how did Halloween get started? Was it something that retailers came up with? Well, you might think that now with the big box stores and with their displays, and you could spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on Halloween. But it reflects an earlier time, a time far back in the dim mist, far back to a time when people were herders, when they took their cattle up to certain places in the summertime, when they brought them back, and it was the festival that said that that part of the year was over. It was a festival when everybody came together, when they got ready for the rigors of the winter, but it also was a good time because they saw their friends and family. The Royal Assembly was there, and if you were connected with the king and you went to the Royal Assembly, it was a big deal. It was a time when the ordinary day-to-day cares were set aside. You had feasts, you had parties, you had meetings, you saw old friends, you met new friends, and it was just a good time. And you can see how as the years, as the centuries went by, you had a change with Christianity. Christians, particularly the Roman Catholic Church, were very smart, very well organized, and just as today, if we have a holiday, can you imagine your government saying, well, we're not going to have that holiday anymore? Certainly not. But couldn't have the pagan holiday. We'll have the holiday on the same day, but we'll call it something else. So it's no accident that these holidays fall, if you look back in time, on the dates that were selected far back again in the midst of time. And they had astronomical connections. As I talk back to the Hill of Tara, where the Neolithic passage grave is, that aligns perfectly after thousands of years with the light coming up on the sunrise of Samhain. So what's new is really old, and what's old has been made new again. And you look at the rise today, no, we don't go door to door as much. We now have trunk or treat, where you can go to a central location such as a church, and they have in the parking lot, have the people open their trunks and the children are in costume. And I also mentioned one other thing. We went to school in our costumes on Halloween, if school was on Halloween, and that was a big deal. And that continued up into modern times. For many, many years, I was an educator, and for part of that time, I spent in an elementary school. And it was a big, big day when Halloween fell during the school week. All the students, all the kids came in costume. There was a Halloween parade. You paraded around the block, all the people that lived near, all the mothers and fathers, all the grandparents, if they could, came out and watched the Halloween parade. So it was a big, big deal, and it is today. A big, big deal. Again, Bill Moore for Radio Vision Network, History for My Grandchildren. I'm trying to give them some idea of some of the things that are our traditions in America, things that they don't often have time for in the school day to go back and tell people about. So again, hopefully you'll tune in again for Radio Vision Network, History for My Grandchildren.
Sub some sizzle. This is the way. The way it's always been. The way it always should be. The way it always will be. Because that's just the way it's supposed to be. Jersey Mike's. Be a sub above.
Simply Gents, located in Marlton, New Jersey, takes care of all your grooming needs, including haircuts, straight razor shaves, massages, facial, manicures, pedicures, and waxing. To find more information or book an appointment, visit us online at www.simplygents.com. The secret weapon of a well-groomed man, Simply Gents.
If you haven't been to Speed Raceway, what are you waiting for? You want to live fast? You want to make every second count? Then grab the family. Round up the guys. Speed Raceway is 100,000 square feet of excitement, whether you're a kid or a kid at heart. Speed Raceway is the place for endless fun all summer long. Log on to Speed